Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining the NARUC-NASIO Task Force on Comprehensive Electricity Planning webinar on the Hawaii Advanced Visualization Energy Nexus model, also known as HAVEN. This is Danielle Sass-Burnett from NARUC. I'm the Director of the Center for Partnerships and Innovation. And we're joined today by Commissioner Jay Griffin from the Hawaii Commission, Carolyn Schoen, the Director of the Hawaii State Energy Office, Michael Schwing, and Jonathan Chin from the Hawaii State Energy Office, who will be sharing about this really amazing tool and all of the great work that's gone into this. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be able to look at it afterwards and find it online on the NARUC Task Force website. Michael, would you go to the next slide, please? As I said at the outset, this webinar is part of the NARUC-NASIO Task Force on Comprehensive Electricity Planning. This is a 2-year initiative that brings together 16 states from across the country to design new pathways for aligned electricity planning that covers distribution level planning, resource level planning, and in some cases, even transmission level planning. These 16 states have brought together their commissions and energy offices to work in a collaborative learning facilitation process. And we are about 6 months in to this 2-year effort. This is one in a series of summer webinars that are intended to meet some of the knowledge and learning needs of the task force members. So we are grateful to Hawaii for offering their expertise to the members of the task force and others in our community. Next slide. If you have any questions during the webinar, as with many webinar software, please open the box to the left where you have logged in. You can type in a question to staff, or you can use the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you. We will be tracking and looking for questions throughout the webinar, and we will have a few opportunities to turn to those if you do have any. And finally, NARUC is conducting a number of webinars this summer, not just those related to the task force. There's also an upcoming webinar on cybersecurity fundamentals, one around tax credits for carbon capture and storage, and a third on grid valuation framework. So you are welcome to join us for any of those, and you can find all the registration links and descriptions at naruc.org/CPI. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Chair Jay Griffin from the Hawaii PUC.
Great, thank you very much. Aloha and welcome everyone out there. We're grateful for this opportunity. First to NARUC and NASIO for the task force in general, but more specifically today in the webinar for continuing the opportunity to highlight the work going on here in Hawaii. For those of you task force members that had the opportunity to participate in Denver, today's presentation will be an extension of the summary. I believe it was the second, shortly in the morning, just on the second day, where one of the task force members from Hawaii, Chris Junker, gave a brief update on the work, and we're grateful for the opportunity that NARUC-NASIO provided to give a deeper look today. The team from the State Energy Office will be going through in detail about this tool. And just from what I thought I could offer, from our perspective as regulators and decision makers, a few thoughts on how we see this, or I would see this applicable to other states, other task force members. And what I've picked up so far from our first meeting and the focus here of the task force on comprehensive energy planning, particularly how we integrate across the different portions and markets of the electricity system. In those planning exercises, I think we're looking at how we integrate existing utility planning tools, production cost simulation model, capacity expansion models, distribution planning models. So we've completed one cycle of that work where we did resource planning analysis, distribution system planning analysis. There was lots of output generated, and the state energy office has really picked up where that work left off. And I think that's the opportunity other states can see here. And so what they've done and what you'll see in the application today is take a lot of the outputs from those plans, the projected capacity, builds some idea of location, and put them in some pretty sophisticated advanced visualization tools. And in our setting where we live on islands, particularly on this island, which with a dense population, it was natural to gravitate towards looking at possible land use impacts. And so I think the value here is thinking about further, not just what types of analyses that you want your utilities to do, but what are the separate applications that can be done to help better understand that information and support decision making. So I think the work here is really scratching the surface on the kinds of applications that can be done. I think a lot of other states will have creative ideas of how they could be applied to your setting. So I hope we can get into that, partly maybe in the Q&A today, but particularly in future task force meetings. And I think with that, this is really the Energy Office has the stage today, so we're looking forward to them showing off the good work that they've done and continuing the discussion in future meetings. So that's all for me. Thanks again for joining us, and look forward to the discussion.
Hi, everyone. This is Carolyn Shawn, Administrator for the State Energy Office. As Jay conveyed, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to NERUC for the invitation to showcase our Hawaii Advanced Visualization Energy Nexus, or HAVEN. I also want to offer thanks to the U.S. Department of Energy for the State Energy Program Competitive Award, which we were provided in 2016, which gave us the opportunity to develop HAVEN. HAVEN has proven an incredibly useful tool, as Jay mentioned, but for our other office functions, we have used HAVEN to address different energy resource scenarios regarding different questions to our office. So we have already taken great advantage of HAVEN. I'd also like to thank the University of Hawaii Laboratory for Advanced Visualization and Applications, or LAVA. We have with us today Ryan Theriot from LAVA. And I'd like to also thank the State Energy Office team, Chris Yunker, Mike Schwing, and John Chin, who have devoted endless hours with great enthusiasm to this project, and we can all see why it's really something well worth our time. So with that, I'll turn it over to...
Great, thanks, Carolyn. So as you mentioned, so I'm Michael Schwing. I work here at the Hawaii State Energy Office, and so I'll start today by doing a quick overview of kind of the landscape in Hawaii, and then a little bit about the creation of the tool, and then we'll have John go into a quick demo and kind of show you some of the functionalities that we've got, and then talk a little bit about some of the challenges and problems that we've attempted to solve through HAVEN. So get started. So Hawaii has adopted some of the most aggressive statewide clean energy goals in the nation, putting it in place a 100% renewable energy target by the year 2045. So to achieve this, the energy sector is going to require a monumental shift as the state moves from a highly oil-dependent system to a future free from imported fossil fuels. We're currently undergoing an extensive planning effort to determine the best path forward to get there. So we're excited to tell you about the tool we've been developing, and it could be used to engage stakeholders and assist planners as we seek to understand, review, and make decisions about energy resource plans on our way to 100% renewable energy. So speaking of 100% renewable energy, so in addition to the 100% renewable portfolio standard set to be achieved by 2045, the state has set interim targets of 30% by 2020, 40% by 2030, and 70% by 2040. Statewide, Hawaii achieved nearly 28% RPS last year in 2018. So well on track to make it to our 2020 goal. In 2008, the state of Hawaii partnered with the U.S. Department of Energy to establish the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative with a goal of meeting 70% of the state's energy needs through renewable energy and energy efficiency by 2030. And so subsequently, the Hawaii State Legislature passed an Act 155, and established the Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard, which specifies that the state will reduce or will create an energy savings of 4,300 gigawatt hours by 2030. So the EEPS, or energy efficiency goal, has been an effective goal at accelerating the deployment of energy efficiency resources throughout the state. And it remains a lower cost resource than most energy options while providing many other important benefits to Hawaii's electric utilities and ratepayers. To date, the state has exceeded its annual targets each year and exceeded the 2015 interim goal. And the state is also on track to meet the 2020 interim goal. So now that the utilities have these goals they need to achieve, you need to have a plan to achieve the goals. And so in 2014, the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission directed the Hawaiian electric companies to file a power supply improvement plan, just a resource plan, to present a clear and transparent optimized roadmap towards a 100% renewable energy future. So the most recent plan, which was filed in December 2016, contained almost 2,000 pages. It was filled with analyses and numerous figures, tables, and supporting narration. So I'm sure many of us are very familiar with these plans in whichever state you may be in. So the Power Supply Improvement Plan was then followed by the Hawaiian Electric Company's recently initiated integrated grid planning process, which they hope to be a fully integrated planning and procurement process rooted in customer and stakeholder input. The utility plans to engage with stakeholders and customers to gather their input and feedback throughout the IGP process and leverage global insights on emerging best planning practices in a systematic manner. So it's an exciting new evolution as we continue to plan for the best path forward to 100% renewable energy. So that's a little bit about how landscape in Hawaii, and now we'll talk a little bit about the project. So in 2016, the Hawaii State Energy Office and its partners applied for a U.S. Department of Energy State Energy Program Competitive Award. The project began around April 2017 and ends at the end of this year in December 2019, with the objective of demonstrating visualization as a means of analyzing and communicating the trade-offs and interdependencies of resource development to achieve 100% renewable portfolio standard for Hawaii's electric sector. So for the project, our office partnered with the University of Hawaii's Laboratory for Advanced Visualization and Applications, LAVA, and the Hawaiian Electric companies. Hawaiian Electric is an essential partner in the project as it's their data and insight from their planning and modeling work that we've been working with to develop into a platform that can be used to communicate this data effectively to stakeholders. So without them, we would have no data to share. And also the LAVA, Laboratory for Advanced Visualization and Applications, conducts research and development in big data visualization techniques and applies these techniques in cutting-edge domains of science, engineering, and training applications. They also spend their time on virtual and augmented reality research and applications and develop and maintain open source large display wall collaboration software named Stage 2. Our funding allows for 2 graduate students at the Lava Lab to work with us 20 hours a week on the design, development, and deployment of visualizations, which we'll walk you through today. The project team has developed a web-based application designed to aid the energy planning analysts in the Energy Office to aid in the exploration of the vast amounts of information behind these energy resource plans. Did I skip a slide? Oh, no, I didn't. We're good. So when we kind of conceptualized the project, the key objectives that we came up with were we wanted the project to aid in the analysis of Hawaii's energy ecosystem, allowing for better energy planning and policy development for the state. We wanted to assist decision makers in understanding the dynamics of the interrelated energy systems, electricity, transportation, water, natural gas, and the potential effects of policies on these, and communicate complex energy data sets, concepts, and goals to stakeholders, and promote and showcase clean energy innovation in Hawaii. So now I'll turn things over to John and have him walk you through some of the functionality of the tool.
Great, thank you, Michael. Let's just pull up our screen real quick. Okay. So now we'd like to show you what the Haven tool looks like and demonstrate some of the useful functions available for looking at the resource plan data. All the data presented here, again, is from HECO's 2016 Power Supply Improvement Plan. That plan had multiple distinct plans, and what we've done is we've loaded in 3 of the plans here in Haven. So you can see the E3 plan, the post-April plan, and the E3 with generation modernization. So this is the user interface of Haven. It's designed really to be intuitive and modular, so the user can pull up any number of data visualizations to explore and compare these data. For example, we can easily pull up a capacity build out of a selected plan. Let's choose the capacity, the plan we want to look at, and we can create the window. So this is the E3 plan build out, and you can move the window around anywhere on the canvas and resize it as you please. And if you want to look at a single chart, it's often useful to use the full screen mode, so it makes it a little bigger. Another thing you can do is click on and off the different resources. So perhaps we want to look just at the solar and DER build out in this plan. So now we've done that. So let's compare it to a different plan. So we'll pull up the post-April plan. And click off the resources we don't want to see. So what we can do here is we can actually make the window transparent to compare the chart underneath with the chart that is overlying it. And you can see that the DGPV, which is the yellow line, is the same in both plans, but the difference is really in the utility scale solar build out. So in the post-April plan, there's about 1,000 megawatts capacity. And then in the E3 plan, there's about 2,000 megawatts of capacity. So if the visual comparison is not enough, we also have tooltips, and you can enable those by hovering the mouse over a data point. And so you can see as Michael drags his mouse along that DGPV line, you actually get the value for each of those years. The next thing we'll look at is data zoom. So imagine you're interested in looking at the load, the underlying load for a plan. I'll pull that up. So this is first on a multi-year basis. Essentially what you can do is you can zoom in to more granular time periods by clicking on the data. So he's clicked there on a single year, so you can see the different months throughout the year. And if you click on an individual month, and then you can click again, and you can see the daily and hourly data that is underlying the original chart. So that's also useful for exploring the data at more depth. Another functionality that I'd like to highlight is the ability to lock charts. So if you pulled up a generation chart, that's fine. Hourly. So say we have two charts on the canvas and you wanted to look at, say, different RPSs for the same day in a year, you'd be able to lock one chart, as Michael did there, while updating the other chart by sliding the RPS slider to the right. So we're looking now at a 100% renewable energy scenario, and you can see the differences in the day. One thing to note here is you can see that the fossil fuel, which is the red in the chart on the right, has disappeared in the chart on the left because it's 2045 and we've reached our 100% renewable energy goal. The last thing that's we're going to cover here is saving sessions. So say you set up a comparison between plans, you want to be able to present this to others, you can save the session and resume loading the saved sessions. So we'll save this one as post-April 2027 versus 2045. Click save. And we can also use the clear window button to clear it all, but now when we load a new session, you can see that that is saved there, and we can load it and pull it up quickly again. And this really does save quite a bit of time because setting up the exact charts you want and laying it out in the way that you want on the canvas can be a little time consuming. So these are some of the basic functions in Haven for exploring the data. And I'm going to turn it back to Michael to talk a bit about land use.
Great, thanks, John. So it quickly became apparent that the impact of energy development on land use would become a critical issue to highlight given the island's limited land resources, especially here on the island of Oahu. Oahu is home to nearly 70% of the state's population, yet makes up only 10% of the state's land area. If a resource plan called for the development of 2,000 megawatts of utility scale solar resources, what would that look like on Oahu's roughly 600 square miles? What do alternative pathways to 100% renewable energy look like, and what are those trade-offs? What are some of the land use challenges for energy development in Hawaii? With these questions in mind, the Haven team started working on an innovative GIS-based solution that would help create a geospatial projection of the future energy resource development. The December 2016 PSIP scenarios for Oahu included a range between 1,074 megawatts and 2,083 megawatts of utility-scale solar development, in addition to the more than 2,000 megawatts of customer-sited distributed solar. The NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, estimated a development potential of nearly 3,000 megawatts of utility-scale solar on Oahu, when including the development of all Class B and C agriculture land. But this amount is reduced to less than 1,500 megawatts if 90% of the Class B and C agriculture lands are not developed. In Hawaii, a 5-class productivity rating system is used to estimate the productivity of agriculture lands, with A representing the highest productivity land and E representing the lowest. So developing 100% of the Class B and C agriculture lands could conflict with other state priorities, such as food sustainability. Then the most recent development that we've been doing with the Lava Lab builds upon the web-based visualization with a focus on stakeholder outreach. The Haven table map, we call it, utilizes a 3-dimensional topographical map that's hands-on, allowing users to explore and compare the plans for large-scale renewable energy deployment. Users are able to engage with an assortment of freestanding dials to control the Haven display, and which encourages discussion and keeps users focused on the map and related data. The dials toggle between the various energy planning scenarios, add and remove map layers, such as the technical potential for solar and wind resources, agriculture lands, government-owned lands, and existing transmission infrastructure. You can control chart views and scroll through time to visually represent the land use requirements of renewable energy resource build-out for each scenario. During our most recent demonstrations of the table map, we found that both the general public and energy sector stakeholders have been drawn to and engaged with the display more than our previous visualizations. Most visits to the display have resulted in spirited discussion and visitors feeling better informed than prior to visiting the display. So now let's take a look at some of the new features that will be released soon on the web-based portal.
Great. So we've been developing a new version of Haven, and the features within the new Haven are mostly the same functionality as the original Haven, plus we now have the ability to easily upload new scenarios and data. Additionally, the code's been refactored, which has made it a bit snappier to use, which is very helpful. So we're going to show you a few things today here. The first thing we'll do is pull up some scenario charts, same as in the older version, but so let's pull up 2 daily generation charts for, say, 2 plans. So right now we're pulling up an E3, and then you just switch over to the post-April, and you can pull up the same type of chart, put them side by side. And now what you can do is you can scroll through time using the chart on the bottom, which is the renewable energy percentage chart. So you can see it updates quite quickly. Another nice feature is the ability to zoom in and out on the canvas. So you can make these charts bigger, smaller, move it around. So we expect this version will be completed by the end of the year, but really what we wanted to focus on for this version is the ability to load a new scenario. So once you have your files formatted correctly, and we'll look at those files as well, it really should just take minutes to load a new scenario. So we're going to load a Maui scenario. So here he's putting in a name, Maui post-April. We'll put in the rough coordinates, which is 20.79 and 156.33. You can select the color of this scenario, and now we're going to add the files. So you click on station files. We're going to browse to the location of that. Oh, okay. So this is the key, which would go on to the station file. And essentially, the key has 3 columns that connect the technology, the name, and whether or not that resource is renewable. And that'll be key for calculating renewable energy percentage. The next file would be the generation file. And the generation file contains hourly data for each type of generation. And then you can see the load there is also included. Then finally, we have the capacity file. This is the capacity build out by technology by year. And so you can see we have different capacities there by technology. All right, so he's done that. Now we're gonna load it up, and it really doesn't take that long, usually 30 seconds or so. And after that, we can go into just pulling up a chart and also adding some layers to the map.
Yeah, so you'll be able to add a new scenario for really any discrete area. It doesn't need to be an island. It doesn't need to be, in Hawaii. We can customize it and make it easy for really any state or county or utility service territory that we could load.
Nope, and it's done. So just to show you it's in there, we'll pull up, make sure you got Maui selected. We'll pull up some charts. There we go. And again, you should be able to scroll through time to check the data. All right, so now we also want to show you how to add layers. And so as Michael had showed you with the land use section, we're interested in different layers. So we're going to add here the transmission layer on Maui. I'll show you how easy it is. Just browse to the layer file, add it. We're also going to add parts. Make that a different color. Add that to the map. And so now that those layer files are loaded, we should be able to pull up a map. And so you can see there's a toggle and you can turn on these different layers. Okay. Oh, we need to select the correct pointer. Yeah. Sorry about that. So there you can see the transmission as well as the parklands that are on Maui. So that's the new tool in a nutshell. Again, we're expecting that to be finished by the end of the project, of course. So by the end of this year, it has much of the same functionality and more. And we're definitely focusing on how to make it more user-friendly in terms of loading your own scenarios from your own data.
And then just really quick, we can show an example from the original map. I'm trying to bring up the example of trying to cite or estimate the land that would be required for a 100% renewable build out. So let's see if we can create that. So as I mentioned earlier, the NREL had done a solar development potential study for Oahu. So the light orange on the map represents that nearly 3,000 megawatts of developable utility scale solar. And then as we go through time towards the 100% renewable energy, then we'll estimate the amount of that land that would be required to achieve the RPS in the plan. And so the dark yellow has now filled in to represent how much land that would require. So we could look at that, and you can see with the E3 generation modernization plan is quite a bit. And if we looked at the plan that had slightly less utility scale solar developed, that was the post-April plan. Try to make some space. We can see that in 2045, that it uses about half of the amount of land that the E3 GenMod plan would take. And you can choose really anywhere in time that you have data for, and it will be able to adjust and recalculate accordingly. So you can compare and contrast throughout the entire duration of the planning data. So how can Haven help policymakers? Well, it will help utilities explain why they made the resource selections they did. It can, why curtail energy opposed to store it at all? And what's the equivalent land use to supply a particular load, such as the electrification of transportation? Ultimately, we can get to how changes in load allow policymakers to provide better direction to utilities on what they would like to see in future planning exercises. Haven allows for decision makers to see how a potential policy decision could impact current utility plans. The Hawaii State Energy Office has used Haven to better understand the implications of policy decisions, such as the land use requirements for renewable energy targets, the magnitude of the need for storage versus curtailment. We've explored smart charging and time of use EV rates. And it also looked at what the impacts of the electrification of transportation on land utilization for the build out of future renewable energy projects would be. So we feel Haven has brought a new perspective to energy planning, bringing together stakeholders and policymakers to explore and discuss the implications of current and prospective policies and energy plans, such as renewable energy resource strategies, energy efficiency, electrification of ground transportation, and land use for food and energy sustainability. So the better these energy plans and policies are understood, we feel the better decision making can be made towards achieving the state's energy goals. And just a quick plug to another project we're working on. We've been working on the Hawaii Energy Visualization Initiative, which is a collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to build an open source capacity expansion and production cost model. This model will allow energy offices to execute their own system modeling runs and allow offices to explore alternative pathways and scenarios independent from and in conjunction with utilities planning processes. Ultimately, the outputs from the heavy model will be seamlessly available to explore via the visualizations available in Haven. So we're looking to complete development of that, I believe, this year. We've got some working web-based prototypes currently and been able to successfully run both capacity expansion and production cost models. So we're really excited about that. So with that, I think that's all I had today. So we could go into Q&A unless you had anything else you wanted to add at the end, Karen.
Well, thank you, Mike and John. I appreciate your presentation. I would like to say that as an administrator, I see Haven as applicable to for use by regulators such as Jay Griffin. As administrator, I also see it useful, as Mike mentioned, for our planning, future planning efforts and impacts. And as administrator, I've found the tool very useful to help the community understand what the impacts are and how we as one community, one state, will have to face and address some of the future choices that affect all of us in the use of different types of renewable resource applications, as well as do we want, as an island state, to continue importing fossil fuels for electricity. So this visualization and all of the data have really been helpful for a number of constituents that we are trying to serve. So again, thank you. And if there are any questions, we open it up to anyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This is Danielle Fass-Burnett from NARUC again. Phenomenal. And every time, at least I've seen or learned about the project, you've done so much more to make it useful and valuable and user-friendly, which is really impressive. We have received a number of questions, and I invite anybody else who has questions or thoughts to please raise their hand with the feature on their GoToWebinar, or else put something into the chat box. We are receiving them, and we'll start going through some of them right now. Could you all please talk a little bit more about the data behind the tool, and if all of the data that you used was provided by the utility? Were there any other sources, and how you integrated all of that?
Sure. Yeah, so I could use the Maui example as kind of example of the data. So all of the resource planning data that we're currently showing in the tool is from the utility, from their power supply improvement plan. And then the map layers are from a various number of sources. So the solar development potential map came from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And then the other layers that we've included on the map come from the EIA or the Office of Planning here in Hawaii. So we're able to add some context to the land of zoning and availability in Hawaii. And then with the heavy tool, the plan is to then be able to generate our own data so that then we can compare and contrast that with the data provided by the utility.
Great, thank you. And let's see, are the data sets, oh, I guess you've mentioned this in other contexts. Is the tool being used by anyone else, or is it available for a license? Is this proprietary for Hawaii? Can you talk about applications at this point that you know of?
So it's still under development, so we haven't released it yet. But I believe the intention, as it's a SCP competitive award, is to make it open source at the end, so to become available to other energy office, any office that would want it. So we'd be happy to share once we have kind of a production model.
The energy offices will have to come with their own data, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair point. I think that I had heard that Puerto Rico, or that NREL is working with Puerto Rico to do a version of Haven for Puerto Rico as well. I don't know if there's anybody from the Puerto Rico team from the task force that's on the call, but if you are, we would invite you to raise your hand if you are willing to speak to that. Not clear to me if we have anyone. We also had some questions about the scale that you are able to analyze with Haven. One of the questions was, could this be used down to the level of a single utility feeder or a neighborhood, or what is the focus of the granularity primarily?
I think that's a place we'd like to get. I think we've started at the system level trying to, because there's just so many issues and really communication efforts around just the system as a whole currently that we've been working through. And I think as we go through time, I think we'll continue the development and try to get down to that lower level.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then as far as the scenarios, can you talk a little bit about the degree to which you're incorporating any assumptions into the development of those scenarios, or are they purely the scenarios that the utility has modeled?
So yeah, like, why don't I pull it up? So what we're showing is essentially the utility's story. It's their data and with no manipulation by us. And then we did go through a scenario on our own where we kind of added some context because we were trying to estimate, we're looking at the electrification of transportation, and we were wondering, how much of this solar would be needed just to charge the EVs that are in the forecast. So we created a little tool that would then kind of highlight in gray to show you the magnitude of how much of that energy would be for the electrification of transportation. So you can see, especially as we go through time, I believe in the power supply improvement plan, the estimate was about 25% of our light-duty vehicles would become electrified. And so you can see it's a pretty healthy amount of the land development that we had identified. So that's an example of a little bit of how we tried to add a little bit of our own analysis and context to it. Another example we had was we were looking at charging. So kind of looking at smart versus dumb charging. So we can look at, oops, all over the place, current slide. Kind of looked at, what would be the effect if we manipulated the load to account for a smart charging program, and a certain percentage of the electric vehicles were charged when we needed it most, kind of in the middle of the day. So it's a little difficult to see, but it ended up being almost 500 megawatt is the magnitude of how much we could shift just with a kind of fairly moderate uptake of smart charging.
Thank you. And have you done any technology changes within your scenarios? Like,
so not yet. Yeah. So right now, the technologies and the generation is all from the power supply improvement plans, as they're a partner in this, and we were trying to really communicate the December 2016 PSIP. But in the future, as we develop additional scenarios through our own modeling efforts, and then the future integrated grid planning process, there'll be potential for various scenario plans where we can compare and contrast. So I think that's something we're really excited about coming up.
We just had another question come in. How closely are you able to arrive at real world results using the application? I'm not entirely sure. I guess speaking in terms of perhaps predicting what land use changes might be.
So how it's estimating the land now, we're trying to just look at it at a magnitude level. We're not trying to select specific parcels for development. I think that's a whole another conversation. But I believe that it's as good as the assumptions that go into it, and we feel like currently they're in line with the amount of land that's required for development in the state. And we also have the ability to adjust that as should panels become more efficient and you're able to build require fewer number of acres per megawatt, or if a new assessment is done on the development potential, we could integrate that.
This is Carolyn. For the real world application, so far as Haven has developed, it's been very helpful in our efforts in the past legislative session to discuss how much solar is required and impinging or not impinging on ag lands in the state, and the highest classification of agricultural lands versus the lesser zoned agricultural lands, because there is a real heated discussion of renewables versus food for Hawaii. And we are in a very constrained geographic location, and how to balance energy, renewable energy, and food supply. So it's been a very real and useful application for us as we try to configure the potential complementary as well as competing uses, land uses, for planning and application in Hawaii.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. We also got another question about, you showed us how energy efficiency is able to be modeled. Can attributes or changes due to demand response also be showcased through the model in some way, through your load profiles and whatnot?
Yeah, we can, much like what Michael showed with the EV smart charge analysis, I mean, any kind of load modifiers like demand response could be incorporated.
Great. A great question here. What are the challenges you're currently facing in developing and using Haven?
I think the biggest challenge is data. I think just the nature of it, there's so much of it, and it's never in the same format that it was last time, or it's, looking even at, looking at other utilities, there's so many different methodologies out there for energy planning and modeling, and probably no two alike, or you're going to have the exactly same format of outputs. So it was kind of data preparation, took quite a while, and trying to come up with what we felt would be a fairly standardized format, kind of schema of the data that would be the same types of data that would be available at any utility. So that's been a challenge we've worked through, and I think that the team at Lava has done a great job putting up with our constant iterations and trying to tweak it and make it just a little better every time. What do you think, John? It's been
great.
I think not being software developers, that's also been a little bit of a challenge, but it's been also kind of exciting. So we get to slowly kind of learn and become more and more self-sufficient over time. And then becoming just more and more familiar with the interface and the software starts to feel much, much simpler than maybe from day one.
And then I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'll ask one. In the context of planning, of course, since this is particularly featured for the task force members, has this been used within, have you all, or has the utility filed in front of the commission with some of the outputs, any of the visualizations, or has this mostly been presented in stakeholder working groups and stakeholder meetings to, at this point, help influence what the utility is filing? Could you talk to that piece a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So I'm not aware of any official filings that have occurred with the outputs or visualizations from it, but I have worked very closely with Hawaiian Electric on a lot of multiple stakeholder outreach events, and so we've taken our kind of display on the road and really gotten a lot of thousands of stakeholders and visitors to the booth to kind of come interact with the display and try to learn about some of the complexities and challenges of achieving our 100% renewable energy goal. So that's been actually really educational and exciting to see how, especially with the table map, they're able to very quickly and kind of intuitively see it for themselves. You know, they start to, well, because we've designed it to kind of try to be hands-on and interactive, but without a, you know, like a laptop screen. So it really feels much more engaging, and we're able to see users, you know, interact with the display and actually get kind of absorbed in it and really start to ask really intelligent questions about the energy system in Hawaii. And so it's definitely been a really positive outcome of development so far.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Does anyone, Carolyn or Commissioner Griffin, do either of you have any final comments you want to provide as we close out for today?
Carolyn, you want to go?
No, I think I've said enough. You can go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sure. Look, I just want to thank the audience, particularly thank the team from the State Energy Office. I think that it's been a great project they've been working on. We look forward to seeing the next iterations of results as the planning work goes on. Look forward to seeing the other folks out there at the future task force meetings, and happy to answer more questions. Everyone have a good day, and thanks again.
Thank you all so much.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And anyone who's part of the task force, you will be getting announcements about additional webinars as well. We're nailing down July, but August I know is going to be around integrated distribution planning. We've got a couple of experts and a state poised to speak on that. And you should have received some requests for scheduling cohort calls in the last few days. So we all look forward to talking with all of you very soon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.